our speaker for today is Henry Overton, and he's with Turnkey Solutions. We're going to be sharing some information with you via email after the presentation. But let's welcome Henry Overton.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to present and to share what I know with y'all. It truly is. And I applaud y'all for coming here. I know you get CE and lunch out of it and you pay into it and whatnot, but that you would come to learn is just, in my humble opinion, a mark of a person of a different caliber. And so it's an honor to share with you. My business, we talk a lot about protection, and y'all do too. You talk with your clients and your prospects about how to do things right so that they avoid pitfalls that you know are coming. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Today we're going to cover a few things that I know some of it's techie, but some of it may relate to you and your business, and some of it definitely relates to your clientele. So there's going to be a lot that is either information that you can use personally or information that you can use and share with your clients. And I want to prepare you for that, because this world, just like insurance, is the techie world, just like the insurance world, changes on a minute-by-minute basis. So today we're going to cover the #1 security threat to your practice, to your computers, to your clients' computers, that antivirus, firewalls, and other security stuff doesn't protect them against. We're going to talk about why firewalls and software and those kind of things just aren't enough anymore in today's cyber threat environment to protect them, and how mobile phones, cloud applications, and all the stuff that's out there available for people to use are seriously jeopardizing your practices and your customers' businesses, and the data and the long-term viability of their organizations. We're also going to look at a brief overview of kind of where the threats in my world and the IT environment have evolved. We're going to look at how to keep yourself out of hot water, and there are some very simple tactical things that you can do and take away this afternoon to protect yourself. And we're also going to look at 7 specific things that, in my humble opinion, in my business, we talk to every client about that they need to do this year to protect themselves, and things that they need to put on their radar. So, without further, and how to get started. Without further, digging into it, we're going to want to protect you from being a sitting duck. Because what happens when you get into a car wreck and you don't have insurance? You're a sitting duck. Gordon is coming after you, right? And what happens if you have a heart attack and you don't have insurance? We were joking about that at my table. We might end up at Lolly Kemper. Some medical resident is going to be working on you. So this is terribly important, and we see in my industry people who don't have these protections come to us after the fact, and it is bad. It is really bad, and this comes to us on nowadays about a couple times a month. We see people come to us without these protections, and they are in a really bad situation. So a little bit background on me. I've not always been bald and fat, but from when the picture came forward. But prior to that, I've been just kind of a lifelong nerd. I tried education and found that that was a really hard way to make money. I've always been passionate about IT. For 20 years now, I've been blessed as one of the owners of the company to share and kind of build our clients. So we've seen companies come through a range of generations of technology. We've seen companies grow, and we've been able to be a part of that, and I really get fired up about that. I primarily, in my role at the company nowadays, I have a great team around me, but so I'm able to focus more on things like security and compliance and strategy, and how are they able to make use of a changing landscape to better prepare themselves, much like y'all. If you provide somebody the policies that they need to have the tools in place when things bad happen, then they're able to succeed against their competitors' environment. When the flood happened, businesses that had insurance were able to do good work, and they were able to keep running. And businesses that did not have flood insurance or those kind of things in place, where are they now? So this is what I'm passionate about. Now digging in, let's get to work. I want to share kind of a background, a little bit of a history of how this has worked. Way back in the old days, criminals had an easy job. They used technology. They leveraged what they had available to them to make use of a target-rich environment. For example, in the Wild West, we could get a revolver, and we'd find a target-rich environment like a train, and there'd be maybe one or two cars that were kind of posh, and you would find the rich people in there, and you'd hold them up, and you'd walk away with 20, 30 people's life savings or whatever watches and stuff they had. So you take technology and you go to where the money is. What that's changed to is nowadays we can take technology and go to where the money is, and the money is all over the world, and one person or one small group of criminals with a little bit of resources that's commonly available on the internet, a lot like a revolver. It's not hard to get a hold of these tools. You don't even have to be a genius to buy these tools on the market now. You can take advantage of millions of people. These are kind of relatively recent hacks towards the top. We see like Marriott, 380, and that number is 380 million people's data. If you've stayed at a Marriott in the last 5-6 years, you ought to go get credit insurance or credit monitoring. LinkedIn, Facebook, MySpace, Yahoo. Yahoo's lost pretty much every password they ever had. So these hackers and these criminals have taken advantage of technology, and they've leveraged it to take advantage of and make a lot of money or find a lot of power, which ultimately that's what most of these crimes are about. So kind of walking through a few examples that you may have heard of. In 2014, 80 million households fell breach when 80 million people got their records, and some 7 million small businesses. That was the J.P. Morgan when that organization got their firewalls breached. In 2014, about 50 million Facebook accounts got hacked. That's so we're kind of evolving. In 2017, something to the tune of 143 million people like you and me got their all of their stuff stolen from Equifax when they got breached. How many of y'all got free credit monitoring for a year after that? I did. So I know I was in there. 2018, just last year, Google had to shut down one of their major social media platforms called Google Plus because they had so many accounts hacked, and that was just one of several, but this is one that this was the tipping point. So if Google is susceptible to these hackers, I hate to say it, but every one of us here, if we all pooled our resources, we couldn't come up with enough money to buy enough firewalls and antivirus to do better than Google. So it's not if this happens to you. This is a win that we're going to talk about. Just later last year, it was the Marriott, and it turns out that it was a little closer. Just a few weeks ago, they notified everybody that it was, it might have not been 383 million. It looked like it might have been 500 million. So, why? All right. If y'all have questions along the way, by all means. Again, I used to be a teacher, so I'm used to people throwing stuff and not paying attention. It's okay. The criminal underground is happening, but let's look at why. Are they coming after your money directly, or are they coming after your data, or are they coming after you for other reasons? Well, let's walk through it. Credit cards. If you get your Visa card stolen, I lose my wallet about once a year, and it drives my wife insane. But when that happens, I don't panic a whole lot because I don't have any cash anymore. I have kids. They take that. And I can call Visa and Amex and cancel that within minutes. And that's why credit cards are not worth much on the black market. They're worth somewhere now about 25 cents. But an iTunes account goes for about $8 on the criminal underground. You think about it. What can you do with iTunes? All kind of stuff. You can buy all kind of things, from movies to media to, you can go now places and buy Starbucks with your iTunes account. So, yeah, it's ridiculous. A physical credit card, if you had that, it might sell for about $190, because it might take somebody a little bit longer to figure out that they've lost it. Takes me about a weekend. So a card cloner. Let's say you're going out to a restaurant and the waiter takes your credit card back to the back to go swipe it for you because he's being nice and helping you out, for a couple $100. Your average high school or college kid that's waiting can make a lot of extra money by cloning your cards. We've had multiple instances down Airline Highway of card cloners being on gas pumps. So just FYI. Fake ATM machines, this is cool. You can buy your own ATM machine, and they put in their card and do all their stuff, give you the PIN, and then you say, oh, I don't have any cash. One medical record though, of all.
Baton Rouge, fake ATM?
Not that I know of. I've heard of one in Houston. That and a lot of this stuff, we'll get to why we don't hear some of it. But a medical record, why is, even today, and I'll show this, why is a medical record worth about $1,000, whereas a credit card, which is money, only between 25 cents and a couple $100? I can't ever change my date of birth. I will die and never have the ability to change what my date of birth is. Most likely, most people don't change their name, unless you're a famous music artist. You can't change your all of your other stuff, like your addresses that you past lived in. So all that information that's in one medical record that y'all have access to a lot of times, is awesome, perfect data for me to go as a criminal and go set up a new credit card account or go buy a Winnebago. So that's why, because you can't change that stuff. My credit card, I can change it tomorrow. This is, in short, it's a very big business. It is a phenomenal business, and we haven't even talked about like the foreign states. Like, it's been very well proven that China has entire wings of their government that are aimed at, like, we have the army, and they have like their hackers, and there's massive groups of people that are hired by these nation states to hack Americans and to hack other foreign countries. So that's another thing. It's not even a conspiracy theory. It's unfortunately been proven right. So let's look at this. How many of y'all work yourself, your company, not the big Blue Crosses or whatever that you may represent, but how many of your companies are under, let's say, 15 people? Anybody? All right. So you think you're small and you're not a big deal. The company that ultimately led to the Target breach a few years ago was a very, very, very tiny HVAC control company. They fixed the chillers in one branch of a Target. They got their computers hacked. Their computers had a connection into Target, into one branch at Target, and with that, the hackers were able to spread to all Targets. And on Black Friday morning, they took millions and millions of credit cards. So if you're tiny, that's great. At least 1 in 5, this is an old stat, at least 1 in 5 small businesses falls victim to cybercrime each year. Latest stats that came out kind of late 2018 is that we're struggling with figuring out exactly how many, but it may be as many as 3 and 4, 3 out of 4 small businesses. The small businesses are low-hanging fruit. Do you know why? Because you have your guard down. You're leaving the door open. You're leaving the windows up, and you're not putting in all the same protections, just at a smaller scale, that the big companies are. So if I can find a really simple way to hack you, and you have maybe 50 records, versus I could spend a week and a half trying to hack this guy who has a few thousand records, I'm coming after you. You're low-hanging fruit as a small business. 58% of cyber attacks are not even like the successful ones, but some of the studies that are coming out is that something like 58% of cyber attacks are aimed at small businesses because they know this. They know that you're probably not investing as you should in protecting your organizations. And this is the same for your clients, by the way. Who in here can rep cyber insurance or breach? Can any of y'all sell it? Like PNC is more of a thing. I think those. If you have somebody that can rep PNC, you need to introduce them to all your clients that you want to stay in business. So, you know, okay, let's deal with this. Why don't we hear more about it? Because nobody wants to admit that. If you don't have to, would you tell your clients that you totally left all of their application at Starbucks and you had to go back that afternoon and ask the barista if they could find your application in the trash can? I would never admit that. Same with cyber breaches. If like I found out that a hacker was on my computers and I had all of, you know, this sensitive information up, I would never tell folks unless I had to, or I was really ethical, or the law said I had to, or something like that. Unfortunately, most people nowadays don't even know that they've been hacked, and we can talk about why. But recently it looks like it's taken somewhere between 2 to 6 months for hackers to stay on your systems, watch you, figure out what you're doing before they ever tip the hat that they've been on your computers. So nobody wants the PR. That's a real fail to like be in the news saying we got breached, because then that really hurts your marketing and your sales pitches. Unfortunately, the last little bit is the legal ramifications are huge, massive. And so we'll go through this. Before we dig too far into this, the biggest complaint, the biggest issue that we find across all of our clientele is that complacency is what gets them. To think that I'm not a target, to think that this is not a real thing, that I don't have to be worried about it. It's kind of akin to saying, I really don't think heart disease is in my family. You know, I know grandpa and grandma and, you know, mom and 3 aunts all had heart attacks, but, you know, it won't happen to me. That's kind of the mindset that we're taking when we say, this won't happen to me, it's not that big of a deal. Even Google's head of security, if they have to stop and say, this happened to us, had we just done some basics really well, it would have stopped. When they have to say that, I have to say that I think everybody should as well. Kind of fine-tune in the last little bit on the understanding what the landscape looks like, what the threat really is that, like we talked about, this is a big research study that was put out by IBM and a couple other huge organizations. They've done it for 13 years straight, so they track a really good trend of these kind of numbers. You can Google it. It's the Verizon Data Breach Report. There's been one for like 13 years now, I think. This last report came out in April of 2018, found that something like 58% of attacks were against small businesses. 50% of the breaches were carried out by organized criminal groups. So you think about that, it's not a 13-year-old in mom's basement. It's like an organized criminal group that's saying, okay, we're going to make some money this year. They don't do this for free. It's not a hobby. 76% of breaches were financially motivated. They were looking for the money. What the other 24% were looking for, trade secrets, power, leverage, God knows what. We haven't figured it out yet. Some of the largest breaches in 2018, we have yet to figure out what the motive was. They stole millions, about 400 or 500 millions worth of accounts, and haven't done anything with it yet, which is kind of spooky. 68% of breaches took months or longer to detect. You think about that. Like right now, there's a better than average chance that there's somebody in this room that has a virus and a hacker watching the computers or your email account. So, for what it's worth. The last little bit of that kind of stops you, makes you think, well, what do I do? How do we fine-tune this? Okay, I know they're using these tools. What are they? Specifically, how do we stop them? So let's dig into that. There's a few things that I tweaked in this particular presentation. I give this to a lot of groups, and there's 1 or 2 things that I've fine-tuned when I talk to healthcare organizations, and y'all are by and large that to some degree, and we'll talk about that. But here are what I want to dig in here is the 7, in my opinion, biggest threats against your organization and a lot of your clients' organizations, and how to deal with them. So, a few slides back, we said 50% were organized, 50% of breaches were from criminal organizations, right? Well, what's the other 50%? Accidents, your employees, your people, you. How many times have I used my credit card in a place where I was like, I'm going to keep a really close watch on my credit card for the next few days. And how many times have you found a great deal on something online and you're like, well, I've never shopped at this place before, I'm a little worried, but doggone, it's like $15 cheaper. This is a very common issue, and what we are finding is that in my organization, most breaches that come to us from our clients and prospects, and most security issues that they know of are like the employee clicked on something they shouldn't have, or they put something where they shouldn't. Employees often use free tools on the web because you're asking them, get this done, get this file to the customer, get this file uploaded to here, or get this sent over to there. So they're putting it on their thumb drive that also has all their files on it and their kids' homework, and it's been to the school and to the PTA and to wherever they go, or they're sticking it in their Dropbox account, and they also have Dropbox loaded up on like every computer they've ever logged into, or they're emailing it to themselves. People are trying to get work done. It's not that they're evil. It's not that they're dumb. They're technically capable of using these tools, and myself too, but we're moving a little faster than we're thinking about what the threat is. And that's the concern there. The FBI is doing some studies lately to see that, and they found that oftentimes, more often than not, it was a disgruntled employee that got fired that does the breach. And they don't have to do it intentionally, and they don't certainly have to do it in a big splashy way, but just on your way out, leave the screen door unlocked, or on your way out, upload everything to Facebook, or on your way out, or a month before, because they know you're going to fire them, because they've been stinking it up and their numbers are bad, and they make a mess at every staff meeting, and they know they're going to be gone soon enough, so they start not encrypting things or just not caring. Disgruntled employees are a huge concern. And this other piece, this number, the concept of you having staff members who are using things they maybe shouldn't. How many of y'all have portals where you're supposed to upload the applications, or places where you're encouraged to do this or don't do that, or put the files here? Well, a lot of times we still have to do something else because we're going to scan it and then we're going to email it to ourselves, and then, well, I got to go pick up the kids, so I'm going to look through it on, Johnny, give me your laptop. I'm going to look through it here for a little bit, or then I'll maybe stick it, Facebook message it back to my home computer. There's so many tools that are out there, and in my industry we kind of call this shadow IT, of the tools that your staff are using, or you are using, or your clients are using, may not be orthodox and may not be kind of meeting that security standard that you want to put in place. So that's what we've got to be really careful about. We'll skip on through to the next one. Malware, in my world, 15 years ago we just called it viruses, but now there's like 9 variants of viruses, so we got to come up with new names. Malware, which is kind of the traditional, what we used to call virus, they're developing viruses faster than you can keep up with it. 350,000 to 1 million new malware threats are being released. How many of y'all would say like every month? Can I get a raise of hands for like how often? What's the cycle? Raise your hands if you think month, or raise your hand if you think year. What about day? Close enough. You're very paranoid. That's good. We'll be there yet. We'll be there soon, I'm sure, unfortunately. But it's per day. That's a million new virus signatures that you would have to write an antivirus product for. 1 million times your software is having a download update. So if you're wondering why your antivirus software or some of these things aren't cutting it, or maybe they're running your computer slower, it's because this is an insane workload that we're having to keep up with. Some of the fun things about this is now we're starting to see computers create computer viruses. So if I find out that you use this one electronic medical record product, and I find out that you're on LinkedIn, and I find out that you have, a Toyota van, all of which is, probably publicly figured out. If I can look on LinkedIn, I see you work at Cerner, I know what EMR they use, and we can track through these things. It takes about 2-3 minutes. I can have the software create a virus that you're very likely to click, or an email that you're very likely to click on. It'll have a signature that no other virus on earth has, because I'm only sending it to 8 people. And so there's 8 times that got deployed, and 2 people click on it, because no antivirus on earth is aware of this thing yet. So artificial intelligence is creating viruses quicker and quicker and quicker, and so we make it to the per second thing. We'll skip past this. We've had just thousands of stories in Louisiana in the last few years. We had a client, this is an unfortunate case in February of last year, where the office manager clicked on an email they shouldn't have clicked on. For 2 to 3 months, the hackers watched them, and right at the peak of when they were cashing up, it was a construction company. Right when they were cashing up, the next day they were going to go buy all the materials to build up to build an office. The hackers had been watching. They were on their computers actively learning how they communicate with the bankers and how they communicate with their project leads, and they knew this was the day that there was going to be the most money in the account, and so they transferred it all and closed the accounts. Next morning, the builder shows up at Stein or wherever to go buy all that stuff, and it was no money. Like, there were no accounts. The accounts were gone. And we won't even get into the story that we unfortunately had just a month ago, where a lawyer client of mine was supposed to get a rather large 7-figure settlement, and the person who was wiring it to them fell prey to a comparable email and wired it offshore. So it was like $7 million. So my client calls me like throwing up on the phone. Unfortunately, we found out that it wasn't their systems, and it was already offshore. So the FBI has not much that they can do about it at that point. So, which leads me to the next thing, bank fraud. FDIC and your clients need to know this. FDIC does not protect a business account the same way that they protect a personal account. If you have a fraudulent incident on your business account, you're required to notify them very rapidly, and they may or may not get you the money back. And there's case after case where the banks are countersuing because you wasted their time. It's gotten very gross on that. So a few things that we try to explain to people. How many of you all have seen they call it phishing, where like the CEO sends an email to you and says, hey, I need you to wire that money real quick. It's 10 grand. I'm trying to close this deal. And it wasn't the CEO. CEO's sitting right next to you. He's like, I didn't send an email. This works. It works beautifully. A few things that I'll put on there, and they're on the screen. But one, use an iPad Pro. Use an iPad Pro or an iPhone or a Google Chromebook, because those 3 platforms are very curated in terms of what apps can get on them, and you can't go installing your own stuff, and you can't usually, they're much more secure about who can write fake apps on them. Use those, use them from trusted networks to do your banking. All right, there's a whole lot of stories back behind that, but we'll leave it at that. I can tell you more offline if you want to talk. Get every possible alert that the bank can send you. Like if they want to text you or email, if they have the ability to text you when you're doing that kind of stuff, sign it up, please. And the last one is kind of a big, well, next to the last one is, it's in here somewhere. Stop with the immediate wire transfers. Tell everybody at your company, I will never ask you to wire transfer me money without like these 4 or 5 other controls. We've had so many cases where people called us and said the wire transfer went through and da-da-da-da, and I can't believe they did that, what an idiot. Yeah, but you had this culture of inside your company of you emailed them to say transfer some money. It was a perfect scoop by the criminals. So let your company and let your organization and teach your clients to have a very provable human process to authorize wire transfers. Like, I want to hear your voice saying do this, but before I'm going to do it, because this happens too much. And carry cyber insurance. That's I mean, they're like pennies on the dollar. And when this happens to you, to be able to call your insurance company and say, okay, we need help with the forensics to figure this out, and we need to get our computers restored, and it's going to cost us 15 grand to get our computers restored. Or, God forbid, we didn't back up anything, and we're going to have to pay the hackers $25 million in Bitcoin or whatever stupid money they want. A lot of the policies will pay that for you up to a certain amount. So, the fourth issue that I'll bring up, and there's a lot here, so forgive me, I'm flying. I can get you PDFs of all this afterwards, is HIPAA. The High-Tech Act of 2009 put all kind of financial penalties for the breach of patient health information or protected health information, depending on which PDF you're reading somewhere. Short version is the government is now saying that if you touch patient information, or PHI, that you are on the hook to take care of it, right? And there's a lot of fancy terms around it, and the law is like 500 pages long. I read the first 125 of it and fell asleep multiple times. But in 2013, there was a new clarification to it called the Omnibus Rule that expanded their ability to fine people for that. And it clarified who's accountable for what. And most of y'all, and we'll talk about this in a second, I believe are what's called a business associate. And you're not a covered entity. A covered entity is a hospital or Blue Cross, perhaps, depending on how you look at it. But you're a business associate in HIPAA's minds, and they now have the ability to fine you as much as they do the other folks. So kind of looking through that, there's just case after case after case. HHS, Health and Human Services, has a website called the Wall of Shame. I don't know if any of y'all heard of that. And you can, if you have a breach of over 500 records, you'll land on that for 24 months. There's 3 companies in Louisiana. One of them's an IT company. So this kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. This was an insurance company just a few years ago that had $3.5 million fine for not a real breach, a potential breach. I think the audit found that they weren't doing things the way they should. It wasn't breached, but there was a potential breach. And this is getting to be more and more, and we can talk about that for weeks. I have this conversation with a lot of folks. I don't think HIPAA applies to me because I'm not really a business associate, or I'm not a hospital, I'm not a doctor, I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. Okay, let's put it down to your code of ethics, or let's put it down to just being good people. The HIPAA protections are designed for, if I'm being optimistic about it and I put my conspiracy hat off, I think they're by and large designed to protect people in our records. I think there's a lot of great security protections in there, and the idea of protecting your customers is an incredible value that you have when you take on this mindset. So if it applies to you or not, legally, the protections that HIPAA laws and the high-tech laws put into place are really valuable for you. Again, this is a Forbes article from 2017 that went through the latest study of some of the underground markets where a healthcare record is worth $1,000. So trust me, the criminals know who you are, and they're coming for you because you're low-lying fruit and you have very valuable information. But it doesn't apply to me. If you want to walk through that again, there's a ton of resources. At independentagent.com, I tried to tweak this specifically to where y'all are at. It defines a lot of clarifications around that in my opinion, y'all are what's called a business associate underneath HIPAA laws. Has anybody else told y'all that? Has anybody told y'all thus far that you are technically a business associate? Yes? Awesome, okay. And why you could say maybe not is because it's law, so it's subject to interpretation. But everything that I've ever read defines y'all as a business associate as a person or entity that performs certain functions or activities that involve the use or disclosure of PHI on behalf or provide services to a covered entity. Covered entity is a healthcare organization, right? So do y'all, what is it? Where's the word? Certain functions or activities that involve the use or disclosure. Do you use patient health information ever? Like name, social security number, claim, insurance account, date of visit, or all, and do y'all have, when you're filing, do you want to know about the last heart attack and the last 9 surgeries they had and those kind of things? That's all PHI, folks. It is. Let's put it another way. If you don't think you're a healthcare organization, you don't think you're a business associate, but let's just say, worst case scenario, Gordon does, or some lawyer that's coming after you. Worst case scenario, if they can make the case, that this is what the high-tech law said. If you have a breach from ignorance while doing your best, like you had everything that your computer nerds and your Blue Cross and everybody said you should do, if you're doing all of that per violation, per record, that means it's $100 minimum fine, minimum per record. So let's say you had 10 records, that's $1,000. That'd pay for a nice vacation somewhere or a small vacation. Maximum they can fine you is $50,000 per year, $1.5 million. Kind of digging down through the scale, if you have a violation from willful neglect and you didn't fix it within 30 days of the incident, like you knew all this stuff, and I'm the 9th person who's talking to you about it, and you unfortunately have a record that you've been to these kind of things, and Blue Cross or whomever has been emailing you stuff, and you've gone through classes, the minimum they can fine you per record is $50,000. That's the minimum that they can fine you per record. Or $1.5 million per year. So hopefully it only happens 1 year. You learned your lesson. So worst case scenario, if a lawyer can convince a judge somewhere that you're a business associate and you really still don't think you are, that's the fee schedule that's out there. So yeah, that's a big threat. Let's talk about the next variant of viruses. We call them ransomware. Has anybody not heard of ransomware? Or short version, it's a stick-up. It's saying, I took your data, I encrypted it, you'll never be able to get it back unless you pay me basically Bitcoin. And if you've ever tried to buy Bitcoin, it's a horrible investment, trust me. But it takes like a month to get it. It's a pain in the neck to try to register and open an account and transfer money in and then tell your bank, yes, I know it's the world's stupidest thing, but I want to buy some of this, because they will call you. They did to me several times, and I said, you sure? But if you get ransomware in your computers, you're going to see one of these funnel things popping up on your screen saying your files are encrypted, which, by the way, this is a breach in Hipaa law, because you don't have 100% control over your files. And there's absolutely no way you can prove that while the files were encrypted on your computer, the hackers weren't sucking them off to their servers and looking at them. So, yeah, I love this quote. A writer was once asked, what kind of writing pays the most? And her answer was a ransom note. This stuff pays really well. On average, in 2019, what we're seeing so far is that the average ransom people are paying is like $3,000 to $4,000 to get their data. Just Google ransomware March 2019 when you get home, because there's been like Orange County just went on the news this weekend in California. Like you remember last year, the city of Atlanta shut down metro systems and all their this is gross. Ransomware is getting worse and worse and worse. It's projected at this year to be happening to businesses every 14 seconds by the end of 2019. So we're getting into your territory there by seconds. And it's going to get worse because it pays. It pays really well. Like if the majority of people don't pay the ransom, they just restore from backups or say, I didn't need those were cat pictures. Just a few of them need to pay for this to, pay for somebody to have a really pretty decent income from this business. So, number 6, unsecured, unmonitored devices. Your iPhones, how many of y'all saw that, anybody use FaceTime, like the chat thing? A couple months ago, a 14-year-old filed a claim with Apple to say, hey, I want the $25,000 prize or whatever, because I just figured out the world's biggest issue ever. I could FaceTime you and FaceTime him at the same time, and even if you don't answer, I can. At that point, there was a flaw in the iPhone where I could turn on both your cameras and watch it. That's not even with a virus. How many of y'all have Nest thermostats at your house? I got the Ecobee, so I'm not going to raise my hand technically, but did you know they have a microphone on them? Yeah. So that's fun. And Google said, oh, we never turned it on. It's not a big deal. We didn't disclose it because it wasn't a big deal because we never turned it on. Yeah, okay, you didn't turn it on, but how come what about the hackers who, took over my home network and started making the baby cam talk? So all of these little things, your home cameras, your Android phones, I use an Android for some stuff. I don't do my banking on it, but I like it because I can install weird software to do security testing and whatnot, but hackers love them because they're really easy to breach. And we just figured one came through the news. They could send you a specially crafted JPEG, like as a signature to an email, that would allow them to take over. When you load it up in your Android, they'd allow them to turn on your camera and take control of it. So it makes you want to throw stuff in the tea, right? Mobile devices, this is getting worse and worse for healthcare. If you have access to your emails and your emails have PHI on them, be scared. The Internet of Things, your Nests, your baby cams, your cameras, your garage door opener, now the blender and the light bulbs in your house, all are being connected to the Internet. And who's changing the default password on their light bulb when they stick it in the ceiling? I wouldn't think to do that. They don't say to do that when you're checking out at Lowe's with your new smart light bulb. So all of these things have been proven time and time again. There was a massive outage on the Internet last year that came from like tens of thousands of places around the Internet were hammering this one chunk of the Internet. And it turns out that the tens of thousands of places that were hammering that one chunk of the Internet with packets and basically what's called a denial of service, they were all this one camera that was sold by this one company, that company was from China, and they had a ridiculously stupid password. It was password on the cameras, and the hackers knew that, and they took control of all of them that they could find, waited until they had enough of them, and had fun. So, for what it's worth. We're wrapping up. This is an oldie but a goodie. Spam. If you don't have some kind of active spam prevention program in front of your email, if you don't treat this seriously, almost everything I've talked about thus far, there are vectors of attacks. There are different combined attacks that the hackers are using, and they almost all start with spam. They almost all start with you getting an email that you really didn't need. That FedEx attachment that says, click here, here's the package, or the phishing attack. Please wire me that $30,000 so I can, go buy this business that we're looking at. Or the malware that comes through with a real link, a real file, but you didn't know that your client was infected. The hackers figured out that they do business with you and you do business with Blue Cross, so I'm going to try to get to them, then they're going to hop over to you, and in all of their emails, the signature has a virus in them. All of this could be stopped. Not all, but a huge chunk of the threats are coming through our email, and that is just the world's simplest prevention. It's the world's simplest concept because almost everybody's used to it, and we get it. So, I'm tired talking. This is exhausting. I I hate selling on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I hate doing this. The concept of telling somebody you're going to die. Why don't we get insurance now before your doctor tells you when you're going to die? Is that fun for y'all? No. You talk about this from like, look, let's make the best use of the tools and assets you have now so that the remaining years God blesses you with are awesome. And if something horrible happens, your family's going to be well protected. We want to look at this from the bright side. And I absolutely feel like there are ways that we can use technology in your businesses and that your clients can use technology to make the most of things and not have to have fear, uncertainty, and doubt about where their technology is going to sabotage their business. So what do we do next? I'll back up to the Hipaa law. Under the security law, it talks about doing a risk assessment. And that's the simple protection that I've talked about for 15 or 20 years now with my clients of stop, assess what you do, assess everything that goes on in your office, and figure out what's going on. Understand how I'm doing business, and how I communicate, and how I transfer files, and how I receive files, and how I bank, and how I upload records, and how I talk to my clients, and my prospects, and my vendors, and all these places. Do a risk assessment, and there's ample information on the internet about the right way to do this and whatnot, but unfortunately what I've found is that thing that I've talked to folks about for so long is no longer cutting it. It's the idea of, I went to the doctor and when I turned 40 and I did all the stuff that the doctor said to do when I turned 40, so I should be good, right? Like my insurance policy should still be good. And then when you all sit down and you visit with him and you say, okay, and you stop smoking, right? Well, yeah, like for a little bit before that, so I have a cigar every couple hours. And you stop drinking, right? Yeah, before that risk assessment, before I went to the doctor to get that policy, yeah, but, or you stopped eating Twinkies and you're exercising, right? Or you don't drive 100 miles an hour, right? What's Progressive doing now to give you an insurance policy? They put the thing on your car to see, and they know if you're going fast, right? So what's the concept? We don't need a risk assessment that happened one day. We need a risk culture, a risk management culture. You need to understand, I'm changing something here. I'm going from Bancorp South to Capital One. How does that affect things? Let's stop and think. Or I'm buying a new computer, or I'm putting in a new copier, or I'm doing something different. Every time things change in your environment, you need to think through the concept of what exposure does that make my business now face? What things changed with this new change? And I just can't stress this enough. How basically this works is start with identifying your risk areas. You look at what those risks are, and you say, okay, so I know my risk areas are wherever I have a computer and wherever I transmit data, and that's here, and my office manager or this vendor out here, and all these things, and you assess those risks. Be pessimistic. What would happen if that email got attacked, that account got attacked, or what would happen if, God forbid, our building flooded? This doesn't have to just do with computer stuff, but just think through these things, and y'all talk about this all day long, right? Like, I'm not this isn't a new concept to you, right? Like, you just talked to people this morning probably about, okay, so that's cool, but what would happen if you died? Your wife going to be able to pay the mortgage? How many of y'all had that conversation in the last, I don't know, month? Yeah, you had to, like, you're asking me, what would happen if I had a heart attack? I'll have to call them, I don't know. So you assess those risks and you create a plan. This isn't rocket science. So like if this got attacked, what would we do? What would our plan of attack be? If I got a virus on this computer, what would I do? If these files that are my patient's records or my customers' records, if that folder on this thumb drive or that folder in this server or workstation or if this computer right here got crypto locker on it and it was a virus and the hackers said I need $8,000 to give it back to you, what would you do? Just think it through. Have the plan. Next up, implement some risk controls. In health world, it's called jog, quit eating Twinkies, stop smoking. In this world, in cyber, it's like we're going to have the absolute darn best firewall or antivirus, and we're going to put our files somewhere that's secure. And I'm going to know everywhere that that goes. I'm going to change the passwords all the time, and that kind of stuff. And then reevaluate and remeasure, because what we find is that tomorrow everything you did may be subject to change if it's best practice or not. In health, most of the time we learn, some of these things are pretty good. That kind of keep going back and forth on whether or not 8 cups of coffee a day are good for you or not. Some of these things in cyber are no questions. Whatever we were doing last week is no longer cutting it. Yeah. Yes, sir.
The risk controls, like on your early Michigan credit cards and things like that. Now you have the chip and things like that. Have the hackers kind of caught up to the chip yet?
Oh yeah. I interviewed a technician yesterday. No, I'm sorry, it was Monday, to come work for us, who works for one of the organizations that has like 1,500 gas stations in the southeast region, and it was sickening how to hear him tell me how easy it is to take control over a credit. Now they have like a special card that they use to program the gas station. Turns out you can buy that on eBay. Have the chips become completely hacked? I don't know. But I do know that PCI, payment card industry, is cracking down even further and further on places that only do swipe. So they're currently kind of hoping for that. And they're also looking at multi-factor authentication. So like you swipe the card and you get a text message. Did you mean to buy this Kentucky? I use an organization that does something competitive to LifeLock. I like them because they tell me a lot more information that's threats to my family and myself, and I put that on all my kids. I think it's valuable because when my credit card or my social security number becomes used elsewhere, I do get notifications. I've never had that bad day. I do know that the guy who started LifeLock, his identity, because he was driving around with a truck, right, with his social security number on the side of it for years, and he built it up and he sold it to Symantec, and the product is still out there, and it's a fantastic product. His identity got stolen like 4 or 5 times while he was doing that, driving around with the truck with the social security number on there, and his company was able to just grab him and shut him down right away. So. Yeah, would I recommend buying a service like that? Yep. Yeah.
It's not that expensive.
They're not that expensive, no.
It's worth it.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
When you mentioned those that maybe upload applications or information to portals, anybody, we either do a paper app or we're logging into a carrier that has a portal. How safe is that information? Because, in one case, I may take a paper application from somebody, then I have to upload it to a portal. So I have 2 pieces there. I got the paper and I've got it, it was on my computer as I was entering it. How safe is it once it's on that portal? Does that take the responsibility away from our end of it? And are the carriers that are collecting this information?
Well, even before, and I'd love to dig in more. I got a few more slides I do want to get through, and I know y'all are going to leave at 1:01. Short version is you got to think the whole step. How are you getting the paper to a spot in a format that you can upload it?
Right.
Let's start with that. How are you doing that?
Well, in some cases, we fax. You can fax it.
Okay.
Or you can upload it to the portal.
Yeah, but like, are you scanning it through your Rico or your, whatever?
From a thumb drive.
Okay. Yeah. So at every spot there has to be transmission security, like it's got to be encrypting. So if you're scanning it and it's coming back down to your email, it's going to China and back, or God knows where and back. So there's a bunch of spots, and we look at the scanners all the time. They're a fantastic hole because most of the time the older scanners, you have to set them up with unencrypted email to be able to send files back and forth. From there, is your computer, not the portal, but is your computer protected adequately is the thing to ask. Because at some point you do release liability to some degree, but if it could be proven that your computer was hacked and they were monitoring that, it doesn't help if you put a copy of it somewhere safe.
Right.
That kind of makes sense?
Yeah.
All right. To that point, second thing that I can't recommend enough is educate your folks. Educate, 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 early and often, just like voting in Louisiana, right? 58% of breaches, data breaches involved insiders. 90 to 97% of the attacks in the last decade or so have been preventable. They were proven to come through things that were patched earlier, and that company just didn't apply the patches or didn't do the basic security stuff. Annual is not enough. I come across so many organizations that say, yeah, we have a cybersecurity thing that happens every June. And we talk to our staff about that. It's not cutting it. One thing is not enough, and especially in y'all's industry, you deal with credit cards because you're taking payments. So PCI is a compliance thing that you deal with. You email your clients, so now you got to deal with GDPR. You also have to deal with Hipaa. So you have a multiple of things that your staff and you need to stay educated across. Educate yourself. It's got to start there. So many CEOs that we talk to are the least informed about their organization's needs. And they expect their staff to be better at it than them, and that's just not fair, in my opinion. And test. There's ample tools on the internet that will test your staff regularly and randomly, and it will provide you the ability to know who the clickers in your office are, because 3% of people will click on anything. If I emailed you and said, this is a virus, don't click on it, you're like, cool. So that's a couple things. And inside of y'all's organization, the Baton Rouge site, the Louisiana site, the national site, y'all have tons. I found just a wealth of information and links out to other places and I really started prep for this conversation today there at those sites. And there's just a tremendous amount of information that you can share in your organization with your coworkers there. The agent survival guide, I found it in a couple places, or it has some fantastic simple tips for starters. And it can't just be one thing. You can't download that one-page PDF and say check. It's got to be a process. And the last one is the concept of a layered approach to security. I'll be done in 5 minutes. Promise.
Is that the one where you have to make sure to check the box that if it's a storefront? I have the worst time with that. You know, when they ask, I'm not a robot.
Yeah.
You see like nine squares and you have to check which one has.
Which one's a street sign or which one's a car?
Oh, that makes me insane.
Yeah. So, what they're doing is it's a layer of defense.
Yeah, it is.
And it is, and it drives me nuts because I always miss one. I got to do it like 4 or 5 times. And God forbid you're trying to do it on your phone.
Right.
I learned I'm 40 the other day. I'm like, I can't see anything on the scene anymore.
Exactly.
To your point, what does layered security look like? Let me put it really simple. It looks different for every organization. It looks different for you, and it looks different for your house. If you have a dog, an alarm, and door locks, that's a layered security. Okay, then we're going to live in a gated neighborhood. I'm going to leave the lights on outside. These are layers of security you're putting in place for your house. One of the fundamental, simplest things is everywhere we go, we're going to talk about backups. How are you backing up every piece along the chain here? But the first one is please patch the operating systems and the software. If you're running Office 2007, you're the world's easiest hack target. There are so many vulnerabilities with that product. It's ridiculous. So use the latest version of the software that's possibly available, and keep your Windows up to date, or your Mac. Macs are just as susceptible to viruses as Windows. There's just not as many of them. Don't tell yourself because you got a Mac you're cool. Well, you might be cool, but you're not safe. A real antivirus product. Windows comes out of the box with an antivirus product. It's the world's easiest hack. It's a horrible thing. If you downloaded a free antivirus, it's not cool. It's not cutting it. You're getting what you're paying for. And worse yet, you have a false sense of security. User training. After we've kept things up to date and we're keeping our software up to date, we're training our people. Another layer is having that process that we talked about, where constantly when things change, I'm educating my staff and I'm thinking through what's the worst case scenario on X, Y, and Z scenarios. Have a really good firewall. If you have that little thing that Cox gave you or AT&T gave you, and that's it, between your network and the world is that's not a firewall. It is not protecting you. It is getting you to the internet. It is opening the door for hackers. A spam filter, email encryption, 24/7 dark web monitoring. You want to see what passwords the hackers know about you on the internet? Come see us afterwards. I'll tell you exactly what passwords on the dark web the criminals know for you. And a plan. Have a plan. That last layer is the biggest that I can recommend, is have a plan for when things go south, just like you tell your clients. It is the same conversation. What are you going to do when you have a car wreck? What are you going to do when you get cancer? It's the same thing. Not if. What are you going to do when, if you die? What are you going to do if you die is kind of a, silly way to start the conversation. And that protects you from the top to the bottom when you have a process in place. And if anybody tells you that they got the one thing that's going to fix all this for you, in my humble opinion, they're selling snake oil. There's not a one thing. There's not a one policy that fixes all the problems for a client, right? I got a stack of like 9 policies at the house that do different things for me. Same with this. So to recap, have a culture in your organization and teach this to your clients of how we're going to assess these things. Have a culture of education in your organization. You have to do CEs and you're here for this, and I applaud you for that. That is really cool that you're here, and I especially appreciate that when I'm talking to an empty audience. So that's always fun. But have that same process in your organization, and layer your security, layer your protections, and that's about it.